Greetings, citizens, and welcome to 2022. As Nindie Nation is a channel focused on video games, indies to be exact, and we just rolled over the 4th digit on our calendar year, that means it's time to talk about the best games that released during our Blue Marble's most recent orbit around the sun. These are Nindie Nation's favorite indie games for the Nintendo Switch that released in 2021. Number 10 is an incredible gem of a game that takes everything we love about isometric adventures and turns it into a memorable, challenging 8 to 10 hours that is full of surprisingly charming dark humor. That's right, Death's Door brings up the rear this year, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's any less deserving of your time or money. Playing as a little crow who works for the Reaper, your job is to help usher souls into the afterlife. But of course, as soon as you start to grasp how to play the game, surprise, something goes terribly awry and you're off on a quest to reap the souls of 3 characters who have tried to cheat death. And he's not happy about it. The soundtrack is composed by David Fenn of Moonlighter fame and is some of his best work yet. The visuals are striking and look great on the Switch, with wonderful use of color, or lack thereof, and the dialogue is both interesting and funny, striking a perfect balance in between the two. The game follows a pattern similar to most Metroid or Zelda-inspired romps. You explore a world, find a dungeon, gain a new ability, tackle the boss of said dungeon, and then return to your black and white office where you'll either set out to find the next dungeon or use your newfound ability to search for secrets. The game as a whole is delightful and very concise, rarely feeling too large or too small. It's a Goldilocks formula that works really well and is one of the best indies of the year that is bound to be on many players' lists of their favorite games for the Switch. In December of 2020, we got a peek at yet another impressive indie from a Brazilian team. And while the final product had a rocky launch, Leap Studios' Tunche delivers an excellent roguelike brawler that kept me coming back and even taking time to complete it on the PC as well. Set in the Amazon rainforest, Tunche follows a cast of characters with slightly different combat styles that feel limited at first, but will have you chaining together 200-hit combos within the first hour of playtime. The world itself is procedurally generated, but ultimately boils down to a few environments, each with a boss at the end. At the end of each room, you're presented with 2 or 3 choices for the next room's rewards, feeling very similar to the way Hades was structured last year. As you can see, the hand-drawn artwork is fantastic and really brings this unique world to life in vivid detail. It launched with a decent amount of bugs, but most of them have been ironed out by now, and even when I do run into a crash, I never lose any progress, which is a major plus. On the downside, the game can get a little monotonous if you choose not to play with up to 3 players, and I don't like how you can only level up the character you're playing as, but the gameplay loop is so much fun and the combo system is so satisfying that I found Tunche to be one of just a few games in 2021 that constantly kept me coming back for more. After a year in early access and almost another full year as a PC exclusive, in October of 2021, the Switch was blessed with one of my favorite 2D roguelikes to date, Skull the Hero Slayer. The first release by Southpaw Games absolutely nails that pick-up-and-play format that can make roguelikes so addictive, but its biggest hook is in the name itself, the skulls. Your character, a bad guy skeleton peon trying to stop the good guys, is able to swap its head at almost any time, equipping up to 2 skulls at once, and there's over 100 to find. Each character has some similarities, and they're mostly grouped into classes like speed or strength, but they all have their own attack, special abilities, and approach to how they pair with another skull in your loadout. During the run, each skull is able to be upgraded multiple times too, so you're bound to find certain skulls that you'd never touch if they're at a lower level, but you may find critical to your success once they're maxed out. You spend most of your time walking left to right, occasionally dodging traps, and battling waves of enemies with encounters that include a vast array of possibilities. Of course, you will fail, and as expected, when you do, you get to level up stats with the loot you've found, but the skull mechanic adds a layer to the formula so impactful, it alone acts as a motivator for each and every run. Will you find your favorite pair and make a run for the end? Will you go out of your way to find new skulls? Will you stick with your initial loadout and pour your currency into upgrading it? The choice is yours, and the journey itself is a colorful, lighthearted romp that is bound to hook you. In 2018, Rainbite released Reverie, a top-down adventure heavily inspired by the classic Zelda entries, and it was a solid first major release. Afterward, the trio of developers hunkered down and tapped the expertise of composer Finn Mitchell-Anyon and writer Jono Peck to create one of the more impressive sophomore releases we've seen at Nindie Nation. Trigger Witch fuses an action RPG with twin-stick shooting while proving it's far more than the sum of its parts. Set in a world where magic and religion have been replaced by an unsettling admiration for guns, you play as Colette, who is on a quest to save her mother after a mysterious portal to another world opened up in their quaint hometown. What starts as a simple story about a girl and her schoolmates quickly evolves into a harrowing and sometimes self-reflective look at what happens when societies become laser-focused on all the wrong things. You'll eventually build loadouts comprised of every typical piece of video game artillery, including one of my favorite grenade launchers ever, and set out on a journey across parallel worlds to stop the evil threatening your way of life. Or so you think. To say much more would risk spoiling what is one of my favorite narratives in recent memory, but I can promise that even if you usually aren't a story person, Trigger Witch delivers something special. The twin-stick shooting, dodging, and movement is at the top of its class, with quick movement and precise control, which makes your time exploring and fighting even better. Some of the puzzles can get a bit long in the tooth, but with this being yet another entry that hits that 8-hour sweet spot, and being complemented by excellent visuals, music, gameplay, and story, Trigger Witch delivers in every other regard, and I can't wait to see what Rainbite does next. Most of the games on today's list include roguelike elements where you'll attempt the same run multiple times, gaining experience and abilities along the way, in large part because A, there's a ton of them on the Switch, and B, because I really like them, and this is my video, damn it. As such, I was fully expecting to enjoy Rising Hell when I saw it pop up on the eShop, but what I wasn't expecting was that this would be the game above all others this year that I kept coming back to again and again. The first major release by Indonesian studio Tahoe Games, Rising Hell is an action-packed, vertically scrolling platformer where heavy metal and brutal combos are the name of the game. The premise is extremely simple. You start at the bottom of a hellacious tower and you need to work your way up. Of course, there's a ton of demonic villains to take out along the way, and Rising Hell outfits your multiple playable characters with just the right balance of simple and effective attacks and abilities that, before long, you'll be stringing together combos that take you all the way up a level without needing to touch the ground. And that feels awesome. You get a few levels with stops to pick branching paths and upgrades, and then face off against a boss. After each run, you spend your currency to unlock perks that can drastically change your approach, and then you set out again. With the heavy metal backdrop and a soundtrack that absolutely shreds, my favorite part of Rising Hell is how it takes less than a minute from boot up to be knee-deep in the action. And runs can frequently be just 10 or 15 minutes long, so it's a great option for a quick gaming fix. There's a generous demo available, and the game at full price is only $10. So please, give Rising Hell a try and let me know if its kinetic action sucks you in as much as it did me. recommending a game that resulted in over 400 deaths, 2 rage quits, and 2 complete restarts may seem weird, but recommending Cyber Shadow is also recommending the game that gave me the greatest sense of accomplishment throughout 2021, which is surprising as it was the first big indie of the year, releasing back in January. Designed and developed by just one person who goes by the name of Mechanical Head, Cyber Shadow is actually the first title published by Yacht Club Games of Shovel Knight fame, and the final result delivers tough-as-nails 2D action that pays homage to its influences while creating something wholly original. You know, just like Shovel Knight. Clearly inspired by Ninja Gaiden, Cyber Shadow has you running around a stunning post-apocalyptic 8-bit world surrounded by all kinds of robots and stuff that wants you dead. And they will succeed. A lot. However, as you play and you take in one of the best soundtracks of the year, you'll realize that Cyber Shadow is almost never unfair. It just walks that fine line as closely as possible. Rather, it's your skill and resolve that will help you see the surprisingly deep story to its conclusion. I would love to say that everyone should check out Cyber Shadow, but I don't really want anyone to try it unless they're pretty sure they can finish it. So I'll say this. Cyber Shadow just might be the peak of my gaming ability and could very easily be the toughest game I've ever played. I did have to take a couple of breaks, but I always found the challenge was fair, and the combination of constantly rewarding and useful upgrades, alongside the 11 chapters that allow revisiting levels for practice or exploration, made the experience feel well worth the challenge, and it's not one that I will soon forget. Looking through my own gameplay records, which are sent to you via monthly summary emails that are really cool if you enable parental controls, just a little tip from your friends here at Nindie Nation, one thing became clear. From late February through the end of May this past year, I played a lot of Curse of the Dead Gods, like over 70 hours of it. Curse of the Dead Gods by Pastech Games throws narrative out the window in order to focus on building a meticulously crafted isometric action game that falls somewhere between Hades and Dark Souls. And boy did that focus pay off. At first I was worried that its heavy emphasis on the dodge and parry systems would turn me away, as it has with most games that draw from the Souls-type genre, but the way that it's implemented with short, predictable animations and lightning-fast input response, as well as a fairly generous window in which to use said abilities, is done so masterfully. But virtually flawless gameplay is only part of the formula here. As a Nindie trifecta, you can expect levels that are procedurally generated, each themed off of one of 3 temples you can tackle, and the game's structure requires you to master a shorter run before granting access to deeper dives. Essentially, when you start, a successful run will be a handful of rooms followed by a boss, and then you're whisked back to your camp all within about 15 minutes. But by the end of your journey, each run can easily take an hour, and you're able to pick which type of run at any given time, which makes Curse of the Dead Gods much more accessible as a portable hybrid game. But what's in a name, you might be thinking? At the end of every room, you're met with a door that will curse you. Sometimes these curses cause you to deal less damage, become stronger in dark areas, or even see bizarre sanity effects on screen a la Eternal Darkness for you GameCube fans out there. There is a broad array of possibilities, and they all play into this push and pull of buffs and debuffs that can really change up your gameplay more than we see from most roguelikes. There's light and dark mechanics, a ton of upgrade trees, a bevy of loadout possibilities, and it all culminates in a challenging, sometimes punishing game that respects your time and aims to deliver a unique experience with every attempt. If you were one of many who fell in love with Hades in 2020, Curse of the Dead Gods just might be the best way to recapture that experience while also finding something entirely new to love. And that brings us to our top 3 Nindies of the year. Now, I am completely smitten with all of the games on today's list, but these 3 in particular, if you've got a pulse, you should check them out. especially this next entry, which is the most fun I had with any game in 2021. It's a bird! It's a plane! It's a, well, I guess it is a bird because it's a goose, but what do you get when you combine the non-stop action of Metal Slug with the traversal and level design of Mega Man X? Oh, and a goose? Well, you get Mighty Goose, of course. Developed by Blast Mode, who somehow managed to also deliver the excellent kunai just 1 year prior, Mighty Goose is a bombastic, ridiculous game with set pieces that would make any 80s action movie star proud. Pistols? Check. Machine guns and shotguns? Of course. A goose piloting a bazooka-toting mech on the back of a flying robot space dragon? Yep, it's got that too. The visuals and gameplay both fall in that realm that is clearly inspired by the best run-and-gunners of the 16-bit era, but it all comes with a modern coat of paint that brings everything up a notch. Beyond the look and feel, Mighty Goose includes a scoring system, collectibles, upgrades, a slightly non-linear path, and non-stop ridiculousness that pulled me in for multiple playthroughs on Switch, PC, and Xbox. My only complaint for the game is that it can be completed in less than 2 hours, but I found plenty of reasons to revisit the gun-toting goose, and there's something to be said for a polished, finely tuned game that focuses on quality over quantity. Mighty Goose is awesome, and I would be thrilled to see the comments for this video filled with people saying that this list got them to finally, pull the trigger or bite the bullet or any other gun-based pun you can think of. Or a goose pun? Are there goose puns? We could come up with a goose pun. Oh, and there's also a button which can be dedicated to honking, you know, because you're a goose. I mean, go play Mighty Goose. Next game. All right, time for some real talk. Earlier this year, life came at me hard, throwing every crappy thing imaginable my way, which ultimately resulted in a hiatus for Nindie Nation, and frankly a pretty dark time in my life all around. During that time though, one game above everything else kept me going, and that game was Dreamscaper by Afterburner Studios. Dreamscaper is two things, a roguelike action RPG and a narrative adventure, but much more the former than the latter. You follow the story of Cassidy, who just returned to her small hometown in the Pacific Northwest after the untimely passing of her sister. During the day, you travel between a few locations in the town of Red Haven, the coffee shop, the park, etc., to chat with about a dozen characters and choose who to build relationships with. When Cassidy goes to sleep, though, she's haunted by nightmares, and that's where the gameplay comes in. You run around various dreamscapes in a traditional isometric fashion, battling enemies with a slew of weapons, abilities, dodges, and parries, until reaching one of the bosses, which takes the form of one of Cassidy's primary fears, such as fear itself, isolation, and regret. Along the way, you'll return to the waking world when you fall in battle, revisit your friends in the town, upgrade, unlock new abilities, and so on, then run the loop all over again. What makes Dreamscaper so special, though, I'd say breaks down into three categories. The first is its variety. There are so many weapons and abilities to unlock, with magic, melee, and ranged weapons complemented by all kinds of, quote, lucid abilities which you'll balance via their respective cooldowns. Second is how player-friendly the game is. There's a ton of difficulty and accessibility options, and the most recent update brought with it some streamlined features that ensure you're always focused on unlocking new abilities or leveling up your favorites. In general, it's a bunch of stuff to make sure that your time in the dreamscape is always productive, and during the daytime, you always know where to spend your time. Finally, the narrative is impeccable. Some of the best writing I've seen in gaming, with each character playing a specific role and delivering dialogue that is down-to-earth, relatable, and believable. All of that culminates into a game that not only became one of my favorites of the past year, but also really helped me work through some of my own challenges with a push-and-pull progression that never got old across the 80-plus hours I spent on both Switch and PC. In fact, of this list, the hardest decision was which game to put at number 1. And that brings me to my favorite game of 2021 and the biggest surprise of the year. Astalon: Tears of the Earth. This game, as far as I'm concerned, is a modern, timeless classic, and a game that, for those who played it, will remember it as one of the best of its genre and of this console generation. That's a pretty big claim, huh? Let me tell you why. At a 30,000-foot view, Astalon is a Metroidvania with RPG elements. You could also say that it's a roguelike, but it really isn't. Yes, you can die, and when you do, you restart at the same spot, and yes, you can buy upgrades, but the structure of the game itself is very much smack dab in the middle of a Metroid and a Castlevania. In fact, if you're looking for a close comparison, with Astalon's swappable characters, its closest cousin is Castlevania 3, the one where you can also swap between characters. But let's hold on for a second, because I'm getting ahead of myself. Do you see these visuals? The pixel art in this game might look like just another pixel art game, but the more you look, the more you'll see just how gorgeous it truly is, how painstakingly detailed and alive every environment is, and the visual fidelity never falters throughout the 20 or so hours I spent getting to 100% completion. You play as Algus, a wizard whose town is being poisoned by a mysterious castle on the edge of town. Along with the fighter Arius and the archer Kiuli, you set out to uncover what's going on in the castle and to purge it of its evil. However, along the way, you learn that something is strange about Algus. He has past memories of the castle and seems to be reliving his adventure, and that's where the roguelike element comes in. Algus knows that he's dying and trying again, but his partners do not, which creates a narrative that I found quite compelling as I worked my way through Astalon's sprawling castle. Along the way, you'll find abilities that let you do things like break open color-coded walls, jump higher to reach new areas, hover to clear long gaps, you know, the kind of stuff you'd expect in a game like this. But the way that it doles out abilities or how you acquire them, and which characters can equip which abilities, is so incredibly open-ended that when I was playing through this game, keeping in touch with my friend Scott from The Gaming Outsider, we were finding, for example, that we could both reach 70% completion, but I've never seen the upper tower area, and Scott had never been underneath the castle, both of which are huge areas. Similar to how many gamers could lump a bunch of open-world games into one category, while taking games like Breath of the Wild or Skyrim and kind of setting those as outliers that are truly open-world, Astalon does the same, and definitely falls into that truly open-world category. This is your world to explore, and these are your teammates, and you are given complete freedom to make this adventure exactly what you want. Speaking of which, the RPG systems are somewhat light, but very deep at the same time. You'll upgrade character stats, strength, health, defense, etc., but you'll do so as you please. Do you build Arius into a tank who can roll through enemies at the expense of having a party who really can't handle airborne enemies? Or will you focus on becoming the most nimble character possible at the risk of becoming a glass cannon? The choice is yours, and with relatively simple respecking, you don't have to worry about making the wrong decision. Also, I mean, if you haven't noticed in the background, the music in Astalon is some of my favorite in gaming, period. And I'm confident it will comfortably rest alongside some of the best soundtracks out there, from games like Chrono Trigger, the Mega Man series, Mega Man X series, Skyrim, and so on. It's really that good. What else can I say without spoiling the game? In my 3.5 years running Nindie Nation, Astalon just might be the one game that I can call my favorite Nindie. I hesitated about placing the crown on the head of the team at Labs Works, but after putting the game down for a few months, playing some other titles, and then giving it a shot on an even different platform, Xbox in this case, I had no doubt that it's deserving of the title. If you're not yet convinced to give Astalon a shot, there is a demo available, and the demo is actually a crafted experience meant to give you an idea of the gameplay without much of the upgrading and narrative. You get a bit here and there, but the story of the demo itself actually plays into the overall narrative of the full game. So even if you are planning on picking the game up, I recommend spending a half hour with the demo first. Your progress doesn't carry over or anything, but by the end of the first hour in the full game, you'll understand what I'm talking about, and hopefully appreciate the lengths that the team went to in order to build such a unique demo. Music, story, platforming, combat, visuals, a deep RPG system, everything in here is at the top of its class. If 2014 saw the release of Shovel Knight as the indie revival for retro action platformers, Astalon does the same for retro action adventures. Regardless of what type of gamer you are, I think you should at the very least check out the demo for Astalon, as it is easily Nindie Nation's favorite game of 2021. So, have you played anything on this list? Is there something you think I missed? If time permits, I would love to toss in some honorable mentions for the year, but if you're looking for more, check out our Nindies We Love videos and head down to the comments to let me know what's topping your list for 2021, and if anything on this list is going to make its way to your Switch. Nindie Nation is a weekly show that covers every new indie releasing for the Switch, and we typically publish on Tuesdays, so if you're new here, subscribe for even more Nindie gaming goodness. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your favorite indie game community. And if someone else referred you here, let me know who. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope to see you around for our weekly episodes, Thursday night streams, or over on our Discord, which you can find a link to in the description. You can also find me on Twitter at Nindie Nation. And with all of that said, we're all done for today. Until next time, I'm Jeff. This has been Nindie Nation's Top 10 Games of 2021. And remember, no matter what type of game you're looking for, Nindie Nation will be right here to help you find just the thing to keep your Joy-Cons synced.